So friends, today we are going to understand about like how we can define different routes. And so here we have some examples. Okay, so if we just want to build any route in Python, first thing that we have to do is we have to import the FastAPI from FastAPI module, right? Next, by using this FastAPI, we have to create an instance. So this app is just a variable. Okay, so we are saving the instance of this FastAPI within this app. Okay, and we are going to use this app to create different endpoints. And now here we can simply run our server, right? So to run that server, I need to use Uvicorn, then that name of the file, that is in our case it's main.python. So I'm just going to write it as main, and then the name of the function, so name of the instance which we had created from FastAPI, and then onward a simple reload just to make sure that whatever like if I make any changes, that should be auto updated. Okay, so this is it. Now we are able to go to this sorry. Okay, so now we are able to go to this path, that is our 8000 localhost, right? So if I go here and just try to check this, as you can see, this API is currently working. And if I want to go to this Swagger UI, so as you can see here we have a Swagger UI. So let's try to see how these different endpoints, these post API like post endpoints work. So as you can see here, this is the first endpoint that we had created. Okay, and as you can see from this post API, we are just not doing anything. It's in simple /post get API. So as you can see, this is in get endpoint, and from there we are trying to get the data for the post. Okay, so here I just created a list. As you can see, we have list, and within that list itself we have a few dictionaries. Okay, so this is the first one, this is the second one, and that each holds this title and content. Okay, so this is what basically we are trying to return from this API. Okay, so now if I click on this try it out and try to execute this API, so by using clicking on this execute button, now you can see we successfully get the data. Okay, we successfully get this response from this endpoint, right? And as you can also see, this is that response which we had set here. Okay, so this is that first post title, and content is first post content, first post title, and first post content. Okay, so this is that first API that we had created here. Now move to this second API. So this second API is this post/post ID. Okay, where as you can see, this post ID is the dynamic part. Okay, and how we had configured this dynamic part? We had configured this dynamic part by simply capturing this post ID here, and here within this method itself, we had defined this read method, read post method. Here we are defining it we are expecting to get some dynamic value which is post ID, and its type should be integer. Okay, so I mean, whenever we are passing some value to this post ID field, it is an integer. I mean, it is not an integer, it's a string. But because of we had defined this as a type as integer here, so Python basically automatically convert that string value to integer if it is possible. Okay, so let me show you what I mean to say. Let's say if I try to send DSFDS, which is not an I mean integer, and but what here we are expecting is integer. Okay, but but this value can't be directly converted to integer even by auto conversion. So if I try to execute this, you can see now we are getting this error. Okay, but why? So this error is directly not being, I mean, we at this point of time we are even not allowed to go to this point. Okay, that I mean this Swagger UI is going to throw this error. Okay, what is that error? This post ID value must be an integer, not a string. Okay, so let's say if I just change it to some string value, so what should be the output though? So that output should be data, which is equals to that whatsoever that I mean this post ID we are sending here. Okay, so that response should be data equals to details of the post with, for example, in our case it is 12. So let's try to execute it, and as you can see, we successfully get this response as 200 code, and the data is details of this post id is 12. Okay, so we had also successfully checked this I mean post id, and we also understand that how we had created this one, right? So now try to move to this next. So as you can see, this is also quite similar with the first one, right? And here, as you can see, now we try to like define this dynamic part with some little twist. Okay, so I mean the simple thing that I want to make sure here, this I mean we can also define this user id like this also. Okay, like this, like dynamic value like this, or we can also define like this. So okay, so now as you can see here, when we are defining the function, when we are defining a function for this endpoint, we define like user id should be an integer. Okay, now if I go to this ui, I mean this endpoint, so this is our endpoint user slash user id, right? And if I try to enter some values, or to do that, I just need to click on this try it out, and let's try to send some integer, I mean some string. If I try to execute, as you can see, now we are again getting this error, user id should be an integer, not a string. Okay, so now if I just try to send some string, I mean some integer, then if I try to execute it, you can see it's successfully executed, and it's given me 200 response with our data as data equals to 12. And why it is so? Because here we are here we're returning this data with that user id whatsoever we are passing to this endpoint, right? Great. So now let's try to understand I mean how we can pass multiple parameters. Okay, so as you can see in this example, let me show you this one. Okay, so as you can see, this is the endpoint that we are creating at I mean here. Okay, by using this app.get method. So this is also a get method. As you can see, this is also a get method, and here we are trying to pass two dynamic parameters. Okay, so that path id could be blog slash one slash comment slash two. Okay, so that means this blog, this is the second part is that blog id, and that I mean this fourth part, okay, is that is our I mean this comment id, which is also dynamic. Okay, and here as you can see, while we are defining the method for this I mean this endpoint that should be executed whenever someone tries to hit this api. So here we are firstly checking this. Okay, blog id should be an integer, and comment id should also be an integer, and here we are also using some limit. Okay, but let's ignore this limit part. Like I will like I will just going to explain this also, but for now just try to avoid this. Okay, so here we are like adding a condition. If the value of this limit is present, I mean it's not null, then in this scenario we need to send this response. And if it is not present, okay, so in that scenario we will send this response. Okay, so let's try this endpoint now um, directly from our Swagger UI. So let me open this, let's click on this, try it out. Now as you can see, we have three fields. Okay, but here this limit is optional field. Okay, why? Because here we are defining either the type of this limit could be an integer or it is a none. Okay, so by default I set its value as none. So if we are not intended or not interested to pass the value for this limit, in this scenario, like we are not forced to it will automatic this none value get set to this limit. Okay, so now just try to add some value here and some value here. Now if I try to execute it, you can see we had successfully get a response, which is we are reading of block 124 and have a comment 14. Okay, and this is that response that we had set here, right? And let's say if I try to set some limit there, maybe 124, and I try to execute it, as you can see, now we have a totally different a return statement, because now we have this limit and it's not none, right? So in this scenario, that data is we are reading the blog, that number is 124 and have a content that is 14 and a limit is 124, right? So now this statement is returned. Okay, so this is how we had configured this this endpoint. So you can also configure an endpoint which have more than one dynamic values, right? Next we had created this custom validation endpoint. Okay, so let me show you this one also. So this is that custom validation endpoint, right? So as you can see here, we only have this ID, right? And its type is string. So we are not allowed to pass any integer here. Let's first try it. Let's first try it out and try to pass some integer there, right? So if I try to execute it, now you can see we have this validation error that id this value error is invalid id format. Okay, so you are not passing the right format. Okay, so that means, so now it passes this validation, it is a string, and here it also passes this id is a string. Now it goes to here and now it checks, okay, that if this id starts with isbn or imdb or not. Okay, so if, as you can see, this id is not start with these either of these two value, so if it is not, then I am willing to throw an error. Okay, so here as you can see, I raise a value error. Okay, so this value error is not something that we import from somewhere, but it is we had an inbuilt method, you can say. Okay, so this will trigger this invalid id format, right? Okay, so as you can see, here we have this invalid id format as a value error, right? Okay, so next let's say if I try to pass this id, okay, this I, then what should be the return value? So let's try to add this and try to execute it, and now as you can see, we have a successful response where this id as idbn, and that item id, this within this item we are getting title and author. So it means here it matches this value, this value, and give this value, this part as like goes here in this item block. Okay, so as you can see, what we had done, so if it passes through this after validation check, right? So then we move here we define a variable which is a list, and within this list we have, sorry, not a list but a dictionary, and within the dictionary we have two two values, I can say, right? And next onward, as you can see, we are just having check if we have some id. Okay, and it also passes this validation check. Then after, we are just trying to get the values related to this key. Okay, so in this scenario, this is the key, this is the value. Okay, so we are trying to target the value. Okay, so as you can see, within this item, now we have this get stored here in this item, and while someone try to return something, okay, so from this return block, it is returning with this id and this items, right? So next, what would be the case if it also passes this validation, this validation, right? But it is not going to match any of the value from this, from this data, right? So let's try to also simulate this case. Let's say if I just remove this 1 2 3, some values, and now it is ISBN 1 2 3, and as you can see, we do not have any such ID, right? So let's try to execute it, if it going to throw some error, and as you can see, it is not going to throw some error. Instead, it is going to get into this else block. Okay, so here what is happening, here we are randomly choosing any of these any of these value, like, and but before choosing any of that random value, we are firstly like convert this dictionary into a list. Okay, so here we are converting this dictionary into a list, and after then we are choosing any of the value. Okay, so let's say after like maybe either, I mean that random is any. For example, here we have this two, only these two data, maybe we have n number of data. Okay, so out of those n number of data, maybe it will just like selected this one, and then onward we are just destructuring these id, okay, and this items value there, right? So we are destructuring this item and id and items, and finally we are returning this id here and item here. That is why we are getting this response. Okay, and next, this is the our last, I mean that you can say this path. Okay, so this will going to help you about like so many things. Let me start, I mean let me explain you what we had done here. Okay, so as you can see, let me also close this one, and now we have this and now we are at our last path, which is path and number validation, right? So, and as you can see, it also holds a dynamic value. Okay, so this item id is a dynamic parameter of this path. Apart from this, we are also having two more, I mean we also having some query. As you can see, this is the query. Okay, so and you can see here now, I mean you can't see this for any, I mean this minimum value or maximum value for any of the other parameters that we had discussed earlier. But as you can see here in our case, we set I mean this should be an integer, and here this query should be an string, but this item id should be a number, integer, and its value should be in between 1 to 100. That minimum is 1 and maximum is 100. As you can see within this query also, this is a string, and now the minimum length should be 3 and that maximum length should be 20. Okay, so now let's try to add some string. Let's try it out and try to add some string, but its value should be less than 3. And if I try to execute it, you can see we have this error, which is this item id required field is not provided. Okay, so I mean we are not providing it. That simply means that we are not following the rules. Okay, sorry. So this error is being generated from this item id. Let's try to add some item id here, 125. Okay, now if I try to execute it, okay, as you can see, now we are getting this error that input should be I mean we are getting this less than equals to error. Okay, so as you can see, and this item should be less than 100. So let's try to make it 100, like 99. If I try to execute it, now I am getting this string should be at least 3 characters. So now this error is being generated from here. Okay, so now let's try to make it more than 3 characters and less than 20. Now if I try to execute it, you will get a successful error, I mean successful response. Okay, though I can show you this response. So within this response, we are sending this data, and within this data, as you can see, this first parameter should be an item id, which is we have this item id, and which item id holds this value of item id, right? That is I mean that is correct. Okay, and the second one is if we have the value for q. Okay, if we have the value for q, in this scenario, simply like add one more data to this dictionary. Okay, with this key is q, like key as q, and value like whatsoever we are receiving, right? As you can also see here, this is the key, and now we have this value whatsoever we had like put here, right? So this is how basically it works. But here we have to understand a few more concepts. So we understand that so we had defining this this item id, right? And here we are using this annotated. Okay, so from where we are basically import this annotated, we have to import this annotated from the typing module. Okay, so we use this annotated, and then onward within this annotated block we define the type. Okay, so here we define this this item id could be integer or a none. Okay, and we here within this path. Okay, so what does it path means? So this path basically represent that, and we also have to make sure that this path should be imported first from this fast API. And one more thing, this query should be also imported from this fast API, right? As you can see here, we had set the rules. Okay, so this item ID should be greater than 1 and less than 100. Okay, and as you can see here, we had set some title for this parameter, uh, so where we can like see this parameter. So as you can see here, I mean where it should, like, it should be somewhere, but it is not showing. Okay, maybe this title doesn't have any meaning. Okay, so is it like I'm using what it is, description? Maybe let's try to add this title. I mean, title should be visible somewhere, no? Let's try to refresh it one more time, and exactly, I guess it is not showing in this title. Okay, no issue. So basically here we are setting this rule, here we are setting the rule like this. Okay, so by using this path, we are specifying that this value, that is item ID, is the path of that URL path. Okay, apart from this, you can see here this queue. So while defining that the type of the queue by using this annotated, as you can see, we are defining that rules also. Okay, that minimum length should be 3 and maximum length should be 20 within this query. Okay, within this query function. Okay, so from where we had imported this query, so we import this query from FastAPI, as you can see here. Okay, now onward, what this query represent? Okay, so this query basically represents here that this queue is a part of query which we will receive in our in our URL. Okay, so as you can see here, as you can see, whenever like when we try to execute this, let's try it out first now. Then this should be some number, this should be some string. Okay, and if I try to execute it, this query is in part of query itself. I mean, that's this is the query and this is the item ID. Okay, right? So as you can also see that here that name of the query is queue, but in that UI, we are trying to access this queue parameter, as query. Okay, as query. Why? Because we had created this alias here. Okay, so this is the use of this alias, right? So this is it. And we had covered a lot of things, and maybe now you are also aware of all of these, like what the use of this random to generate some random to either generate some random element or to select something by random. We also see this, what is this use of this fast API to create an instance of this fast API that we are running as in server. This path is used to define some value we are retrieving from this path. Here we can use this query to make sure that either to inform that some values we are defining is we need to look into this query part. Okay, and we are also able to set some validations, right? And this annotated is something that we should use. Okay, and this annotated gives and that help our Pythontic model to generate error. Okay, and apart from this, after validator is basically used, to if I want to, like, before running this function, if I want to execute something. Okay, so that I can do here. So it is a kind of middleware for you. Okay, so that is used to validate our input, right? So this is all about it, all about this path parameters and path and queries, and how you can set like different paths, and how you can validate your data, how you can define the types of different inputs, how we can create nested paths, right? And nested dynamic parameters, So how we can like add our custom validations and apply a check, and how we can like at the same time we can define like get the data from that query also, and from that path also, or even though if you are willing to get some data from the body, like request body, you can simply refer like instead of query or path, you can directly refer as body here, right? So this is it about this video. So in our next video we are going to see like we will be more focused on this query parameters, okay? And then onward we are going to look at this request body parameters, okay? So for now this is it. If you have any question, please ask me in the comment section. I will try to answer it, okay? And let's meet you in our next video. Till then, have a nice day and goodbye. Thank you.